By the time Alexandra stood up in the Hannibal municipal meeting room, Connie already knew her daughter had come prepared to make the private hurt public. It was a Thursday evening in October. Rain tapped against the high windows, and wet coats had left dark marks across the folding chairs. Connie sat in the second row beside Larry Flores, her mother's attorney. Ray Fuentes was on her other side, holding a yellow legal pad he hadn't written on once. At the front of the room, a photograph of the Larkspur Inn rested on an easel. The old building looked tired in the picture. Half its porch leaned toward the river. Several windows were covered with plywood. The sign above the entrance had faded until only the last few letters could be read. Most people in that room had driven past it for years. That evening, they were there to discuss its future. Alexandra turned so everyone could see her face. She was wearing a cream jacket Connie remembered from her real estate advertisements. Scott sat behind her with one ankle resting across his knee. "My concern is simple," Alexandra said. "My grandmother was 91. She was sick. My mother controlled her appointments, her medications, her mail, and almost everyone who came into that house." A few people shifted in their chairs. Connie looked at Alexandra's hands. Her daughter had folded them neatly at her waist, the way she did during a difficult property closing. Alexandra continued, "Now we're being told that an asset worth a great deal of money somehow bypassed the estate and went straight to my mother. Nobody in the family knew about it. Nobody was consulted. I think the town deserves to know whether an elderly woman was pressured into signing documents she didn't understand." Ray leaned toward Connie. "You want me to say something?" "No, she's lying. I know." Larry had a folder open on his lap. Inside it were copies of the papers Alexandra claimed Paulette hadn't understood. He knew when each one had been signed, who had witnessed it, and where it had been recorded. Alexandra didn't know everything yet. She knew enough to be angry. The Town Preservation Board chairman cleared his throat. "Mrs. Reed, you'll have a chance to present whatever evidence you have. I'm asking for transparency." Connie looked past her daughter toward the photograph of Larkspur. 4 months earlier, she hadn't known the place existed. She hadn't known her mother had ever stood on its porch. She hadn't known there were papers hidden inside walls, or money saved under a name she'd never heard. She had known only that Paulette loved her. For most of Connie's life, that had seemed like enough. Then Paulette died. And within 48 hours, Connie learned how little love counted when other people had already begun pricing the furniture. It had happened in June, during a week of heavy Missouri heat. Paulette's last morning began at the kitchen table on Lindell Avenue. Connie was making toast, and Paulette was trying to remember whether she'd already taken her morning pills. "You set them right there," Paulette said. "I haven't set them anywhere yet." "Yes, you did. That was yesterday." Paulette frowned at the empty saucer beside her coffee cup. "Yesterday keeps leaving things around." Connie smiled and opened the pill organizer. For 8 years, she'd learned to treat confusion gently. Correct what mattered. Let the rest pass. A repeated question could be answered again. A misplaced name didn't need an argument. Pride was harder to repair than memory. She placed 2 pills beside Paulette's cup. "Both of these?" "Both. The little white one makes me dry. It also keeps fluid from settling around your heart." "That seems rude of it. It has poor manners." Paulette took the pills. Outside, a delivery van stopped at the curb. Connie glanced through the window, but it continued down the street. The upright piano stood against the far wall of the dining room, dark wood dulled by years of sunlight and furniture polish. One of its ivory key coverings was chipped. Another key made no sound at all. Paulette followed Connie's glance. "That needs tuning. It's needed tuning since Gregory was alive. Gregory could carry a tune. He could carry half of one." Paulette laughed. It was a thin laugh by then, but it was still hers. Gregory had been gone since 2019. Connie had nursed him through his final illness in the same careful way she now cared for her mother. There had been appointments, medication charts, towels warmed in the dryer, and quiet meals beside a bed. After he died, Connie had barely cleared his shaving things from the bathroom before Paulette's health worsened. Nobody formally asked Connie to become a full-time caregiver. Families often avoided saying such things plainly. Alexandra said Grandma shouldn't be alone. Jared said he could help on weekends when work allowed. Connie had already retired from teaching, so everyone looked at her as if the answer had appeared by itself. She moved into the Lindell Avenue house with 2 suitcases. The weekends became less regular. Alexandra was busy building her real estate business with Scott. Jared lived outside town and worked long shifts maintaining equipment at a food plant. They called. They brought groceries now and then. At Christmas, they praised Connie for how well she managed everything. Paulette knew what it cost her daughter, even on days when she forgot the date. That morning, she reached across the table and placed her hand over Connie's. "You stayed." "Of course I stayed. That doesn't mean everybody would." Connie wiped a crumb from the table with her thumb. "Eat your toast before it turns into roofing material." Paulette took one bite. A few minutes later, she said she felt tired. Connie helped her down the hall and settled her into bed. The curtains were open, and sunlight fell across the quilt Paulette had sewn from blue cotton scraps. Connie brought water. Paulette didn't drink it. At first, nothing seemed urgent. Paulette's breathing had been uneven for months. She slept more every week. Connie sat in the chair beside the bed and began sorting clean laundry. Then Paulette opened her eyes. "The floor," she whispered. "What about it? You need one." Connie thought she meant the old rug had slipped again. "I'll check it. Yours." Paulette's fingers moved once against the quilt. Connie took her hand. "I'm right here, Mama." Paulette looked at her for another moment. Whatever she wanted to say didn't come. Her breathing slowed, paused, and then stopped so quietly that Connie waited before she understood. She called the hospice number first, then she called Jared. Alexandra answered on the second ring. "Mom, she's gone." There was silence. "When? Just now? Are you sure?" Connie looked at Paulette's face. "Yes." Alexandra began crying. Connie listened, one hand still holding her mother's. By noon, the house was full of practical people. A hospice nurse arrived, then the funeral home. Jared came straight from work with grease along one cuff. Alexandra and Scott arrived together, carrying iced coffee they left untouched on the kitchen counter. Alexandra stood in the bedroom doorway but didn't enter until the attendants had taken Paulette away. "I should have come yesterday," she said. "You didn't know. I said I would. You came now." Alexandra nodded, but she didn't look comforted. That afternoon, they sat around the dining table and discussed the funeral. Paulette had already chosen the church, the hymns, and the dress she wanted. She had even written the names of 6 people who could serve as pallbearers, though 2 of them had died before her. Scott opened a notes application on his phone. "Do we know where the life insurance papers are?" Alexandra looked sharply at him. "What?" "The funeral home will ask." Connie pointed toward the sewing room, the metal file box in the closet. "I'll find it," Alexandra said. Connie almost told her to wait. She didn't know why. Alexandra was Paulette's granddaughter. She had every right to help. An hour later, Alexandra emerged carrying the file box and a brown envelope. "Grandma kept cash in here." Connie looked inside. There were several bundles of bills, mostly 20s, held with paper bands. That was for emergencies. "How much?" "I don't know." Scott began counting at the table. The sound of bills snapping under his thumb seemed too loud for the day. Alexandra touched Connie's shoulder. "We'll keep track of everything." Connie believed she meant it. The funeral was held 4 days later. Half of Hannibal seemed to know something Paulette had done for them. A woman from the church said Paulette had paid her electric bill one winter and made her promise never to mention it. A retired letter carrier remembered collecting sacks of quilt orders from the Lindell Avenue porch. A man Connie didn't recognize said Paulette had sent his mother a blanket after their house burned. Deborah Simon stood beside the casket for a long time. She had worked with Paulette years ago, back when quilt orders arrived through the mail and fabric covered every chair in the sewing room. She never threw away a useful scrap, Deborah told Connie. Cloth, money, people. She thought nearly anything could be put right if you handled it carefully. Ray Fuentes came through the receiving line in a dark suit that didn't quite fit across his shoulders. He'd repaired Paulette's porch, replaced her furnace, patched her roof, and fixed nearly everything in the house except the piano. "I'm sorry, Connie," he said. "Thank you for coming. Your mother would have complained about all these flowers. She would have asked what they cost. She would have asked for the receipt." For the first time that day, Connie nearly laughed. After the burial, everyone gathered in the church basement. There were ham sandwiches, bowls of potato salad, sheet cake, and 3 kinds of coffee. Connie moved from person to person, accepting condolences until the words lost their shape. Alexandra stayed close to Scott. Jared carried plates for older guests and took leftover food to Connie's car. When they were leaving, he hugged his mother near the parking lot. "Call me if you need anything." "I will. I mean it." I know. He drove away before she did. The first day after the funeral passed in a tired blur. Connie washed serving dishes, returned borrowed casserole pans, and placed sympathy cards in a basket. She slept badly in her old room. On the second morning, exactly 48 hours after the funeral ended, she woke to the sound of a truck backing toward the house. A warning signal beeped outside. Connie went to the front window. A white rental truck stood along the curb. Scott was guiding it backward with one hand raised. Behind him, Alexandra unlocked the front door using the key Paulette had given her years before. "What are you doing?" Connie asked. Alexandra stepped inside. "We need to clear the house. Today, the estate has expenses." "So you rented a truck?" It was available. Two men in work gloves came up the walk carrying folded moving blankets. Connie looked from them to Scott. "Nothing's been read yet." Alexandra set her purse on the hall table. "I have Grandma's power of attorney. That ended when she died." Alexandra's mouth tightened. She hadn't expected Connie to say that. "It still shows I was handling her financial affairs." "No, it shows you could help while she was alive." Scott came through the door. "Can we please not make this harder than it needs to be?" Connie turned to him. "Then tell those men to wait. They're paid by the hour. That's not my problem." Alexandra lowered her voice. "Mom, there are debts." "What debts?" "Medical expenses, funeral costs, house expenses, property taxes. Hospice was covered. Mama prepaid most of the funeral. There are always expenses people don't know about." "Which people?" Alexandra glanced toward the movers. "This isn't the time. It became the time when you brought a truck." For several seconds, neither woman moved. Connie could hear the rental truck idling and a lawnmower somewhere down the block. Then Scott took a document from a folder. "We have an estate sale company ready to take the furniture on consignment. That protects the value. If we leave everything sitting here, bills keep building. Larry told us not to move estate property before the will reading." "He said not to dispose of anything important," Alexandra replied. "He said not to move it." Alexandra picked up her purse. "I'm not arguing in front of strangers." She walked into the living room and began pointing. The movers took the sofa first. Connie called Larry's office. His receptionist said he was in court. Connie left a message, then called Jared. He answered over machinery noise. "What's wrong? Your sister is emptying Grandma's house." "What do you mean emptying?" "She has a rental truck and movers." "Why?" "She says there are debts." Jared exhaled. "Alex said she was organizing an estate sale. She didn't say today." "Mom, I can't leave right now." "I didn't ask you to leave. Let me call her." Connie ended the call before he could hear the movers dragging Paulette's dining table across the floor. The house changed by the minute. The sofa disappeared, then the end tables. Scott removed framed paintings from the walls while Alexandra wrapped Paulette's china in newspaper. The silver tea service went into a plastic bin. So did the jewelry box from the bedroom. Connie stood beside the dresser. "That stays." Alexandra didn't look up. "It has to be inventoried. Then inventory it here. We can't secure the house. I'm living in it." Alexandra stopped wrapping. Temporarily, the word landed harder than Connie expected. She looked at her daughter. "Where do you think I'm going?" "We'll figure that out." "You brought a truck before you figured out where I'm going?" Scott appeared in the doorway. "The house has to be sold." "Who decided that?" "It's the only practical option. It hasn't been left to anyone yet. The estate can't carry it. You don't know what the estate can carry." Scott looked toward Alexandra, and Connie saw it then. They had discussed this before the funeral, maybe before Paulette died. The truck hadn't been a hurried decision. The estate sale company hadn't been found that morning. They had a plan, and in that plan, Connie was another item to be moved. Alexandra closed the jewelry box. "You're upset. My mother died 6 days ago. That's why I'm trying to handle this. By taking her rings, they're estate assets. So is the piano. Are you taking that?" Alexandra glanced toward the dining room. Nobody wants that thing. Paulette's upright piano remained against the wall while everything around it vanished. Scott lifted one end, tested the weight, and let it drop with a hard thump. "It's not worth the trouble," he said. "It's out of tune, the finish is bad, and one leg's been repaired twice." "Once?" Connie said. Scott looked at her. "Ray repaired it once. Fine. Once. It's still scrap wood." By late afternoon, the truck was full. The cash from Paulette's emergency envelope was gone. So were the jewelry, silver, china, furniture, quilts, framed photographs, and the little walnut desk, where Paulette had answered quilt orders for decades. Alexandra left Connie's clothes in the bedroom closet. She also left a suitcase on the bare mattress. "I reserved you a room at Mrs. Bell's place for 2 weeks," she said. "It's furnished." Connie stared at the suitcase. "You reserved me a room until we know what the will says. And if I don't go?" Alexandra rubbed her forehead. "Mom, don't do this." "Do what? Turn everything into an accusation." Connie almost answered. Instead, she walked through the empty rooms. Rectangles of clean wallpaper showed where pictures had hung. Dust marked the shapes of missing furniture. A single teaspoon lay under the place where the sideboard had stood. In the dining room, the piano looked larger without the table and chairs. Its bench was tucked beneath the keyboard. Paulette's round water stain remained on one corner of the wooden seat. Connie sat down. The bench gave a low creak, but it held her. Alexandra came to the doorway. "That can stay until somebody hauls it off." Connie rested both hands in her lap. "No." "No what?" "Nobody hauls it off." Alexandra looked at the old piano, then back at her mother. Why would you want it? Connie didn't know. Not yet. She only knew it was the one thing they had judged too heavy, too worn, and too worthless to take. She looked at Alexandra and said, "Because Mama did." Alexandra's expression softened, though not with understanding. It was the look people used when they thought grief had made someone unreasonable. "Fine. Keep it. I will. It can't stay here after the house sells." "I heard you," Scott called from the front porch. Alexandra turned away. Connie remained on the bench until the rental truck pulled from the curb. The rooms were so empty that its engine seemed to vibrate through the floor. When the sound faded, she took out her phone and photographed everything. She started with the dining room, then the living room, the bare walls, the empty closet shelves, and the marks left by the furniture. She photographed the kitchen drawer, where Paulette kept spare cash for groceries. It had been cleared. She photographed the sewing room, including the empty place where the walnut desk had stood. Connie wasn't sure what the pictures would prove. She only knew she didn't want Alexandra deciding later that the house had always looked that way. She found a spiral notebook in her bedroom and wrote down what she remembered seeing on the truck. It was a schoolteacher's list, plain and organized. Dining table and 6 chairs, silver tea service, blue flower china, service for 12, 3 handmade quilts from the hall cabinet, walnut writing desk, jewelry box and contents, emergency cash from metal file box, Paulette's bedroom furniture, living room sofa and tables. She paused, then added family photographs. Those weren't worth much to an estate sale company. That made their removal feel worse. The front door opened. Connie set down the pen and walked into the hall. Jared came in wearing his work clothes. His safety glasses were still pushed up on his head. "They're gone? About 20 minutes ago." He looked into the living room. "Good Lord, you called her?" She didn't answer. She was busy. Jared walked from room to room. Each doorway seemed to reduce whatever defense he had planned to make. She said they were taking some larger pieces into storage. They took the teaspoon's family and left the teaspoon. "What?" Connie pointed toward the dining room floor. Jared picked up the spoon. He rubbed it against his shirt and placed it on the windowsill. "Where's the furniture going? Ask your sister." "I will. She'll say storage." "Maybe it is." "Then ask which storage." He glanced at Connie's notebook. "What's that?" "An inventory. Did you call Larry?" "He was in court. I left a message." Jared took his phone out. "I'll call Alexandra again. Not from here." He lowered the phone. "Why?" "Because I'm tired, and I don't want to listen to you ask her questions she should have answered before she came." His face tightened. He was hurt, but Connie didn't have room to take care of that too. "Okay," he said. "What do you need right now?" She looked toward the suitcase on the mattress. "A ride to Mrs. Bell's." "You're actually going?" "For tonight. You can stay with me." Jared lived in a small house outside town. His spare room had become storage for fishing equipment, unopened boxes, and an exercise bicycle he used to hang work shirts. "I'm not sleeping between your tackle box and a laundry rack. I'd clear it. Not tonight." He nodded. They packed Connie's clothes together. She took enough for 2 weeks, though she didn't like Alexandra choosing the length of her uncertainty. She added her medication, Gregory's photograph, 2 books, and the folder holding Paulette's hospice records. In the kitchen, she found 1 mug, 1 plate, and an unopened box of tea. Alexandra had taken the kettle. Jared carried the suitcase to his truck. Before Connie left, She locked the front door and checked it twice. The house no longer felt secure, but it was still the last place she'd heard Paulette laugh. Mrs. Bell rented rooms in a large brick house near the hospital. She was a retired nurse with stiff knees and firm rules. No smoking, no overnight guests without notice. Kitchen privileges ended at 10. The room was on the second floor. It had a narrow bed, a dresser, and a window facing an alley. Jared set the suitcase beside the bed. "This isn't right." "No." "You want me to bring you dinner?" "I ate at lunch. That was hours ago. There's a cafe on the corner. I can stay. Go call your sister." He stood with both hands in his pockets. "Mom, I didn't know they were going to do that." "I believe you." The relief on his face bothered her. He wanted being uninformed to be the same as being blameless. Connie wasn't ready to give him that. "Call me tomorrow," she said. After he left, she unpacked only her toothbrush and nightclothes. The rest stayed in the suitcase. She sat on the bed and listened to Mrs. Bell's television downstairs. A game show audience applauded someone for choosing the correct refrigerator. Connie called Larry's office again. This time, he answered. "I got your message," he said. "I've been trying Alexandra. She won't answer you either. Did she remove property from the house?" "Nearly all of it." "With what authority?" She showed Scott a paper and called it the power of attorney. Larry was quiet. "That authority ended when Paulette died," I told her. "Did anything leave before today?" "The cash and the insurance papers came out the day Mama died. Alexandra said she was keeping track." "What cash?" Connie explained. Larry let out a slow breath. "Write down everything you remember. I already started." "Good. Take pictures of the house. I did that too." "Connie, did Paulette ever tell you she wanted Alexandra administering the estate?" "No, she didn't tell me that either. Who is administering it? That's part of what we need to discuss at the will reading." "When is that?" "Monday morning. I was waiting on one final filing from the court." Connie looked at the closed suitcase. "Can the house be sold before then?" "No." "Can they donate the piano?" "Not if it belongs to the estate. Alexandra said she was leaving it until somebody hauled it off." "Keep the house locked. I'll send written notice tonight that nothing else is to be removed. She has a key. Then I'd prefer the locks be changed." The thought of changing Paulette's locks felt disloyal for about 1 second. Then Connie remembered the rental truck. "I'll call Ray. That's a good idea." Ray arrived at the Lindell Avenue house the next morning with a toolbox and 2 new deadbolts. Connie met him on the porch. He studied the empty living room through the open door. "They took the curtains? They were custom made. They left the rods. Those were harder to sell." Ray looked at her. "You joking?" "A little." "Good. I was worried." He replaced both locks while Connie searched the house more carefully. The sewing room had scraps of thread caught along the baseboard. A thimble sat beneath the radiator. Connie picked it up and put it in her pocket. In Paulette's bedroom, the mattress remained because the movers had decided it was stained. The bed frame was gone. Alexandra had emptied the dresser before taking it, leaving one of Paulette's handkerchiefs on the floor. Connie found unpaid utility bills in a basket beside the back door. There were no collection notices, no large medical balances, and nothing that explained the urgency Scott had described. She carried them to the kitchen. "These are current." Ray glanced through them. "Water's due next week. 4 days ago, Scott said there were estate debts. Maybe he meant the $38 electric bill. The funeral account still had money in it. Mama prepaid most of that. Then he meant something else. Or he wanted me to think there was something else." Ray handed the bills back. "What are you going to do? Listen on Monday? That all? For now." Ray tested the new lock and gave Connie 2 keys. She placed one on her ring. The other she kept in her purse instead of offering it to either of her children. Monday morning, the family met in Larry's office above a pharmacy downtown. Connie arrived first. She wore navy trousers and the white blouse she used to wear for parent conferences. She brought her notebook, the photographs on her phone, and Paulette's unpaid bills. Jared came next. He kissed her cheek and sat across from her. "Alexandra says the furniture is secure." "Where?" "She wouldn't tell me." "Did you ask?" "Twice." "That's useful." Alexandra and Scott entered together. Alexandra carried a leather folder. Scott carried coffee. Larry closed the door. "Before we discuss the will, I need to address the removal of property from the Lindell Avenue residence." Alexandra opened her folder. "I acted under the authority Grandma gave me." Larry looked at the old power of attorney. This expired at her death. I understand that now. You were told before you moved the property. My mother was upset and confused. Connie didn't move. Larry said, "Where is everything?" "In secure storage." "Which facility?" Scott answered. "A private warehouse. Name and address. We'll provide it." "You'll provide it today." Nothing is to be sold, transferred, donated, or discarded. Alexandra crossed her arms. Nobody stole anything. I didn't use that word. You didn't have to. Larry turned to Connie. Do you want to make a formal report? Alexandra stared at her. Connie could see the fear beneath her daughter's irritation. It wasn't fear of losing Paulette. That part had already happened. It was fear that someone would name what she'd done before she could explain it into something respectable. Not today, Connie said. Alexandra relaxed slightly. Connie added, I want the location of every item, and I want a written inventory. You'll have it, Alexandra said. Today. Scott put down his coffee. Larry placed the power of attorney aside and opened Paulette's will. Most of it was ordinary. Funeral expenses were to be paid first. Remaining personal property was to be divided among Connie, Jared, and Alexandra after appraisal. The Lindell Avenue house was to be sold, with the net proceeds divided equally between the three of them. Alexandra glanced at Scott. The house sale hadn't been invented then. But it wasn't hers to arrange alone, and Connie saw that distinction clearly now. Larry read several small gifts. Paulette left Deborah her collection of quilting patterns. Ray was to receive her tools, including the red metal box he had given her years before. The church received a modest donation. Then Larry paused. There is one clause written with unusual specificity. Scott shifted in his chair. Larry read it exactly. I give my upright piano, its matching bench, and all parts, contents, attachments, papers, objects, and effects found within either the instrument or bench to my daughter, Connie Hill Walton, for her sole ownership and use. Connie looked up. Larry continued. For the avoidance of doubt, anything found within them belongs to Connie alone and shall not be considered part of the remaining personal property of my estate. The room went still. Alexandra gave a short laugh. What does that mean? It means the piano and bench belong to your mother, Larry said. I understand the first part. What does she mean by anything found within them? I don't know. Did you write that clause? I did. Why? Because Paulette instructed me to. When? When we updated her estate documents. What's inside the piano? Larry closed the will. She didn't tell me. Alexandra turned to Connie. Did she tell you? No. Are you sure? Connie held her daughter's gaze. I've never been less interested in making you comfortable. Jared rubbed his jaw. Scott leaned toward Alexandra and whispered something. She shook her head. Larry continued with the rest of the will, but Connie heard little of it. Her mind had gone back to Paulette's last morning. The floor. You need one? Yours. At the time, Connie had thought her mother was confused. Now she wasn't sure. After the meeting, Alexandra followed Connie into the hallway. You knew Grandma was leaving you something. I knew she was leaving me the piano when Larry read it. You lived with her for 8 years. Yes? You had access to everything. So, did you 2 days after the funeral? Alexandra's face reddened. That's not fair. Neither was the suitcase. Scott opened the office door. Alex, leave it. She didn't. If there's money hidden in that piano, it belongs to the estate. Larry spoke from behind them. The will says otherwise. Alexandra turned. That clause could be challenged. You can challenge almost anything if you're willing to pay a lawyer. That doesn't make the challenge sensible. Connie went downstairs. Ray was waiting in his truck. She had called him the night before and asked if he could help move the piano if it became hers. She hadn't explained why. Well, he asked, it's mine. Good, the bench too. I assumed the bench came with it, so did I. She handed him a photocopy of the clause. Ray read it twice. Then he looked toward the second-floor windows. Your mother made him write all that? She did. You think there's something in it? I think Mama expected me to look. That was Connie's first deliberate decision since the truck arrived. She wasn't going to dismiss her mother's words as confusion. She wasn't going to let Alexandra's urgency hurry her. She would look carefully, and she would keep what she found private until she understood it. They arranged to move the piano the next afternoon. Ray borrowed a low trailer and brought 2 furniture dollies, straps, boards, and a retired delivery driver named Calvin Moore. The three of them worked slowly. The piano fought them at every doorway. Its casters barely turned. One wheel had flattened on one side, and the repaired leg made Ray nervous. "Don't push from there," he told Calvin. "This corner carries wrong. I've moved church organs heavier than this. Then you know not to argue with old wood." Connie removed the loose music rack and wrapped it in a blanket. She carried the bench herself. Alexandra arrived while they were lowering the piano down the porch ramp. Her car stopped sharply at the curb. She got out without closing the door. "What are you doing?" Connie kept hold of the bench. "Taking my piano. I scheduled a charity pickup for Friday." "You scheduled someone to take property that isn't yours. It's a donation. It's still mine." Alexandra looked at the trailer. "Where are you putting it? Somewhere dry." "Where?" Connie walked past her and placed the bench in Ray's truck. Alexandra followed. "Mom, this secrecy is making everything look worse." "To whom?" "To the family." "Jared knows I'm moving it. That isn't what I meant. I know." Ray tightened a strap around the piano. Alexandra lowered her voice. "If you find something valuable, you need to tell us." Connie looked at her. "You mean the way you told me where Mama's furniture went? That's different." "Yes." Alexandra waited for Connie to explain. Connie didn't. The piano went to Ray's barn workshop on the edge of town. He had built the barn for equipment and slowly filled it with things people believed he could repair. An old kitchen stove stood near one wall. 3 dining chairs hung from rafters. A canoe with a cracked hull rested across sawhorses. They placed the piano on a level section of concrete. Connie wiped dust from the top. "Can it be tuned?" "Probably. Whether it'll stay tuned is another matter. You know pianos now? I know when something is loose, swollen, cracked, or pretending not to be." Calvin left after helping unload. Ray opened the front panel and inspected the strings. "Mice have been in here. Recently? No, long time ago." He showed Connie scraps of yellowed paper caught near the lower frame. They were too small to read. Ray removed the key slip and pressed several keys. The dead key had a broken bridle strap. 2 hammers were badly worn. "Nothing unusual in here," he said. Connie examined the interior anyway. She ran her fingers along the edges, checking for taped envelopes or loose panels. There was nothing. Ray watched her. The will mentioned the bench, too. They turned toward it. The seat was covered in faded green fabric. Connie remembered sitting there during lessons while Paulette counted time from the kitchen. Ray picked it up, then immediately set it down. "What?" "It's heavy. It's a solid bench." "Not that solid." He turned it over. The underside appeared ordinary, a wooden panel held by 4 corner blocks. The screws were dark with age, but the green fabric looked newer than the wood. "Your mother recovered this?" "About 6 years ago. She said the old fabric had split." "Who did it?" "She did." Ray pressed one corner of the seat. "This padding's thicker than it needs to be." Connie pulled the thimble she'd found from her pocket. She'd been carrying it since the house was emptied. "Open it." Ray removed the screws carefully. The wooden panel lifted, revealing the underside of the seat and several layers of batting. He peeled the fabric back from one edge. Beneath the padding was another board. This one didn't belong. It had been cut to fit inside the frame, creating a shallow false bottom. A small brass tab lay flat against one side. Ray looked at Connie. "You ready?" "Yes." He lifted the board. Inside lay a folded piece of old paper, a brass key, and a white envelope with Connie's name written across it in Paulette's hand. Connie picked up the envelope first. The note inside contained one sentence. "For when you need a floor, that's yours." She read it again, then unfolded the old paper. It was only part of a document. The lower half had been cut away, leaving an incomplete property description, part of a seal, and one name typed in fading ink. Larkspur. Ray stood beside her without speaking. Connie held up the brass key. It was too small for a house door and too old for any lock she recognized. "What's Larkspur?" she asked. Ray shook his head. "I don't know." For the first time since Paulette died, not knowing didn't leave Connie helpless. It gave her something she could follow. Ray took the paper to his work table and switched on the lamp. "Don't fold it again," he said. "The crease is nearly through." Connie placed the key beside it. The brass had darkened around the teeth. A small oval tag hung from the ring, but whatever had once been written, there had worn away. Ray found a clear plastic sleeve meant for appliance manuals. He slid the document inside without touching the damaged edge. "We should call Larry, not yet." Ray looked at her. "I want to know what the word means before Alexandra hears about it. Larry won't tell her. He might ask someone who does. That's usually how finding things out works." "I know." Connie put Paulette's note back into the envelope. "Give me 1 day." Ray didn't argue. He covered the open bench with a clean cloth and locked the workshop before driving her to Mrs. Bell's. That evening, Connie searched old maps and newspaper archives on her phone. Larkspur appeared first as a flower, then as a street name in another county. She added Hannibal and found an old advertisement from a newspaper issue stored online. Larkspur Inn, fine river views, Sunday dinner, rooms by week or season. The advertisement was dated 1954. A later result mentioned a fire in an outbuilding. Another listed the inn among properties scheduled for repair or demolition. The most recent photograph showed a long, 2-story building above the Mississippi, with a broken porch and weeds up to the lower windows. The address was on River Bluff Road. Connie enlarged the photograph. The roof sagged over the rear wing. A rusted chain crossed the front drive. A red notice was fixed to one porch post. She sat on the narrow bed until the screen dimmed in her hand. Paulette had hidden the name of a condemned building in a piano bench. The next morning, Connie called Deborah. "I found something that belonged to Mama. That could mean anything." "Your mother kept grocery string. It says Larkspur." Deborah didn't answer. "Deborah? Where did you find that name?" "In the piano bench." Another silence followed. This one was different. "Come over," Deborah said. "Bring whatever you found." Deborah lived in a small yellow house near Riverview Park. Bolts of fabric still filled the glass cabinet in her dining room. A cutting mat covered half the table, and a magnifying lamp bent over an unfinished quilt block. Ray arrived a few minutes after Connie. He carried the document sleeve in a flat cardboard box. Deborah put on her reading glasses. When she saw the typed name, she sat down. "Well," she said, "Paulette finally did something with it." "Did what?" "I don't know. She stopped talking to me about Larkspur years ago." "What was it?" "Her home." Connie pulled out a chair. Deborah looked from her to Ray. "The Hill family built that inn. Not Paulette's parents alone. It went back further than that. Her grandparents ran it, and then her father took over. They served meals downstairs and rented rooms upstairs. Paulette grew up doing laundry, trimming beans, and carrying pitchers of water to guests. She never told me. She didn't like talking about what happened. What happened? The bank took it in 1961. Paulette had been 26 then. Connie wouldn't be born until the following year. Deborah removed her glasses. There were bad seasons, repairs they couldn't afford, and a loan her father thought he could carry. Then he got sick. By the time the bank foreclosed, there wasn't enough left to fight with. They moved into a rented place with whatever fit in 2 cars. Connie thought of the rental truck on Lindell Avenue. Did Mama try to get it back? Every year in her mind, she'd say, "When the quilts do well, I'll buy Larkspur." Then the roof got worse, the owners changed, and life kept costing money. The quilts did do well. Some years, Deborah smiled faintly. Your mother could make $1 sit still until she needed it. We mailed orders to nearly every state. She handled the accounts. I handled patterns and cutting. By the time we stopped working together, she had customers who ordered Christmas quilts every year. Why didn't she buy it? I thought she never had enough. Ray tapped the plastic sleeve. Maybe she did something? With half a deed? Deborah asked. We don't know that it's a deed, Connie said. It looks like one. Half of one. Deborah leaned closer. What else was in the bench? Connie showed her the key and note. Deborah read the sentence, pressing her lips together. Did she ever mention a floor? Connie asked. Not to me. Do you know what the key opens? No, but she kept keys for everything. File boxes, trunks, the old pantry lock. What pantry? At Larkspur. Connie sat forward. Deborah pointed to the photograph on Connie's phone. The kitchen was in the back. There was a narrow pantry with one shelf that always sat crooked. Paulette hated that shelf. She said her father hid money behind it during slow winters. Did you ever see it? Once, before the foreclosure. I was visiting her. We were young girls, but her mother still made us shell peas. Ray looked at Connie. We need the county records first. Deborah nodded. Find out who owns the place before you go pulling shelves from walls. They went to the recorder's office that afternoon. The clerk brought up the parcel on a public terminal. The current owner was listed as Hollow Bend Holdings Trust. Tax notices went to a post office box that had been closed. No individual name appeared on the screen. The parcel history ran through several owners after the foreclosure. Connie recognized none of them. "What's Hollow Bend?" she asked Ray. Could be a company, could be nothing but a name on paper. The clerk showed them a scan deed from 1994. The image was poor. The first page named Hollow Bend Holdings as buyer, but the remaining pages weren't available online. "Can we get the complete deed?" Connie asked. "It'll have to be pulled from archive storage." "How long?" "Several business days." The clerk opened another screen. "You should also speak with the collector's office. This parcel has delinquent taxes." "How delinquent?" 3 years. A notice had been issued for the county's August tax sale. The amount due, including penalties, was just over $14,000. Connie felt the problem widen all at once. Until then, Larkspur had been a name, a key, and part of a family history she'd never heard. Now there was a deadline. If the taxes remained unpaid, the county could sell the tax claim to someone else. That wouldn't settle ownership immediately, but it would begin a process Connie might not be able to stop. Ray asked when payment was due. The clerk gave them the final date. It was less than 3 weeks away. Outside the courthouse, heat rose from the sidewalk. Connie stood in the shade beneath the stone steps. $14,000, she said. "We don't know that the property has anything to do with you. My mother put part of its deed in something she left specifically to me. Part of something that looks like a deed. You sound like Larry. He charges more." Connie looked across the street. "If we wait for every answer, it could be sold. If you pay taxes on property you don't own, you might never get the money back." "I know. You should talk to Larry now." This time, she agreed. Larry studied the document in his office and compared it with the recorder's online image. "The typeface matches," he said. "So does the recording stamp, at least the part we can see." "Does that prove anything?" "It confirms this fragment probably came from the 1994 deed." "Who owns Hollow Bend Holdings?" "I don't know yet." "Could Mama have owned it?" "Yes." "Could someone else own it?" "Yes." "What happens if I pay the taxes?" "You prevent the sale. That's all. Paying someone's property taxes doesn't make you the owner. But if Mama did own it, then you'd be protecting an asset while we establish where it belongs. And if she didn't, you'd be giving $14,000 to protect a stranger's building." Connie looked at the fragment. "Can you find the trust?" "I can try. If it was private and never filed with the court, it may take time. How much time? I can't promise." Time was the one thing the county had already measured for her. Larry told her not to tell Alexandra or Scott until he knew more. Connie appreciated that he didn't make her ask. For the next week, she and Ray worked from records, old directories, and Deborah's memory. They drove out to River Bluff Road twice. On the first trip, they stayed outside the chain. The building stood beyond waist-high grass, larger than it had appeared in photographs. The front porch faced the river. Several columns were still straight, though vines had climbed around them. Connie could see where the original sign had hung, Larkspur Inn. Only pale shapes remained beneath years of dirt. A condemnation notice warned against entry. Another sign listed structural hazards and gave a city contact number. Ray walked the perimeter as far as the fence allowed. "The front wing isn't as bad as it looks," he said. "Rear roof's a mess. Can it be saved?" "Anything can be saved if you have enough money. That doesn't mean it should be." Connie touched the brass key in her pocket. On the second trip, Deborah came with them. She stood beside the road, gripping her cane with both hands. "That porch used to wrap farther around," she said. "There were rocking chairs all along there." Connie watched her face. "You remember it clearly. Some places don't ask permission before they stay with you." Deborah pointed toward a row of windows at the back. The kitchen was there, pantry beside it. The crooked shelf? If it hasn't fallen down. They didn't enter. Connie wasn't willing to cross a condemnation notice without proof that she had a right to be there. The archive copy of the deed arrived 2 days later. It should have answered the question. Instead, it created another one. The deed clearly transferred Larkspur to Hollow Bend Holdings Trust in 1994. The buyer's mailing address was a post office box Paulette had once used for quilt orders. But the attached trust information was missing. Larry called the recorder's office. Then he called the attorney named on the old filing. That attorney had died years before. His practice had closed, and the surviving files had gone into storage with another firm. "Hollow Bend was connected to your mother somehow," Larry said. "The address is too specific to be chance. But you can't prove she owned it, not from this alone." What about the piece in the bench? It shows she possessed part of the deed. It doesn't establish that she controlled the trust. Connie returned to Mrs. Bell's and opened her bank account on her phone. Her retirement income covered ordinary living expenses. The savings account held money she and Gregory had built slowly. A portion came from the life insurance left after his funeral and final bills. $14,000 was not everything. It was enough to notice forever. She imagined Gregory asking 3 questions. What did she know? What could she lose? What would happen if she did nothing? She knew Paulette had hidden the deed fragment deliberately. She could lose $14,000. If she did nothing, the tax claim could be sold before Larry found the missing link. The next morning, Connie went to the collector's office alone. The clerk explained again that payment gave her no ownership rights. I understand. You're paying the full delinquent amount? Yes. Do you have an interest in the property? I'm trying to find out. Connie authorized the payment. When the receipt printed, her hand shook once as she picked it up. She folded it carefully and put it beside Paulette's note. The tax sale listing was updated that afternoon. Larkspur was marked paid. Connie hadn't considered how closely Scott watched those listings. Property flippers looked for unpaid parcels, neglected houses, and owners who could be approached before a deadline. Scott checked the county site every week. He recognized Larkspur. A clerk he knew confirmed who had made the payment. The information wasn't secret. 2 days later, Connie, Ray, and Deborah were standing near the inn's rear entrance when Scott's truck came up River Bluff Road. Alexandra's car followed. Both vehicles stopped outside the chain. Alexandra got out first. What have you done? Connie stayed where she was. You'll need to be more specific. You paid $14,000 in taxes on this place. Yes. With whose money? Mine. Scott came through the grass, holding a printed parcel record. This property is held by a trust connected to Grandma's old business address. Connie looked at Larry's name on the corner of the copy. Scott had been gathering the same public pieces. Alexandra pointed toward the inn. If Grandma owned this, it belongs to the estate. We don't know that she owned it. Then why did you pay the taxes? To keep the county from selling the claim while we find out. You had no right to hide this. Connie almost laughed at the word. Before she could answer, another car pulled in. Jared stepped out. He looked annoyed until he saw the inn. Alexandra said you'd spent your savings on a condemned hotel. She left out several details. I told him what matters, Alexandra said. Deborah moved beside Connie. No, she said. You told him what frightened you. Jared looked at her. What is this place? Deborah pointed toward the faded sign. It was your grandmother's home. Her family built it, and the bank took it from them before your mother was born. Alexandra went quiet. Jared looked from the inn to Connie. Grandma never said anything. She did better than saying something, Deborah replied. She spent years trying to get back what was lost. Did she buy it? We're still proving that. Jared looked at the broken porch, the boarded windows, and the chain across the drive. Then he looked at his sister. You said Mom found a cheap property at a tax sale. That's what it looked like. No, Connie said. That's what you hoped it was. Scott folded the parcel record. We need to get inside. You aren't going anywhere, Ray said. If this belongs to the estate, Alexandra has an interest. So do Jared and Connie, Ray replied. Yet only one of them paid to keep it from being sold. Jared stepped closer to his mother. Do you have a key? Connie touched the brass key through her pocket. Not for that door. He nodded slowly. For the first time since the funeral, he didn't ask Alexandra what happened next. He asked Connie, What do you need me to do? Help me keep them out until Larry tells us who can enter. Jared glanced at Alexandra. That includes you. Her face changed. You can't be serious. I am. You got here 10 minutes ago. And you got here because Scott knows somebody at the courthouse. That has nothing to do with this. It has everything to do with this. Scott stepped toward Jared. We're trying to protect an estate asset. Jared didn't move, then called the estate attorney. Connie watched her son hold his ground. It wasn't an apology, and it didn't repair what had already happened. Still, it was the first useful choice he'd made without asking his sister's permission. Alexandra looked at Connie. You set this up. I didn't know he was coming. You expect me to believe that? No, I'm learning what your beliefs are worth. Ray turned away to hide a smile. Alexandra walked back to her car. Scott followed after taking several photographs of the building, the tax notice, and everyone standing near the rear door. Jared waited until both vehicles had gone. Was that what you needed? For the moment. He nodded toward the inn. What now? Now we do this properly. Larry contacted the city that afternoon. The city contacted the county. For several days, each office seemed to believe another office should decide whether Connie could enter. The condemnation order prohibited occupancy, not a supervised inspection. Ownership was the harder question. Hollow Bend Holdings remained the recorded owner, but nobody had yet produced the trust papers showing who controlled it. Larry sent the city the deed fragment, the full recorded deed, Paulette's will, and Connie's tax receipt. He explained that they were searching for documents that might establish the responsible owner. The city finally agreed to a limited entry. A building inspector had to be present. They could examine the structure and remove papers or personal property, but they couldn't begin repairs. Connie signed a form acknowledging loose plaster, rotten floors, unstable stairs, mold, exposed wiring, animals, and several other hazards that sounded as if the building might object to visitors. Ray read the form. They forgot angry raccoons. Are there angry raccoons? There are always angry raccoons. The inspection was scheduled for the first Tuesday in September. Connie spent the night before it in Mrs. Bell's room, looking at the brass key beneath the bedside lamp. She had been there longer than the 2 weeks Alexandra had reserved. After the first payment expired, Connie paid weekly from her own account. She still hadn't unpacked the bottom half of her suitcase. The next morning, Ray brought work gloves, dust masks, flashlights, a pry bar, and sheets of plywood. Jared arrived in old jeans and heavy boots. Deborah came too, though she agreed to wait outside until Ray declared a safe path. The inspector unlocked the chain across the drive. He wore a hard hat and carried a clipboard. No one separates, he said. No one uses the stairs until I clear them. If I tell you to leave, you leave. Ray pointed to a side window where the plywood had pulled loose. Someone's been getting in. The inspector noted it. They approached the front porch. Up close, the inn showed every year of its neglect. Paint had curled from the columns. A gutter hung down near one corner. Wasp nests filled the light fixture above the door. Ray tested each porch board with the end of his pry bar before letting Connie step forward. 2 boards near the entrance had softened through. Jared placed a sheet of plywood across them. The front door was swollen in its frame. The inspector tried a ring of city keys, but none fit. Ray worked a thin bar near the latch. Can you open it without breaking it? Connie asked. I can try. The latch released after several minutes. The door moved inward only a few inches before scraping against debris. Dust, damp wood, and old animal droppings had given the air a sour smell. Connie pulled on her mask. The front room had once been the parlor. She could tell by its size and the remains of a tiled fireplace. Wallpaper hung in long strips. A ceiling medallion remained above a spot where a light fixture had been removed. The inspector shone his flashlight upward. Don't stand under that section. A wide brown stain spread across the ceiling. Connie moved closer to the fireplace instead. On the mantel, beneath dust and bird feathers, someone had carved a row of initials. P.H. She touched them with one gloved finger. Could be anyone, Jared said softly. It could. But she knew how Paulette formed a capital H. The right upright always leaned slightly outward. Connie had seen it on birthday cards, quilt labels, and notes beside the telephone. This H leaned the same way. The inspector led them through a dining room with missing floorboards along one wall. Beyond it was a narrow hall. Several room numbers lay scattered on the floor, small brass ovals that had once been fastened to doors. Jared picked one up. Should we take these? Leave everything unless it matters to the records, Connie said. He placed it back where he'd found it. The stairs rose from the center hall. The bottom steps were intact, but part of the upper railing had fallen. The inspector blocked access with orange tape. No second floor today. We need the kitchen, Ray said. Rear of the building has the worst roof damage. Then we'll go slowly. They passed through swinging doors into what remained of the kitchen. A metal sink had rusted through. Cabinet doors sagged open. Plaster had fallen across the center of the floor, and a young vine had pushed through a broken window. The pantry doorway stood to the left. Connie's pulse quickened. Ray entered first. He tested the floor and tapped the walls. 3 shelves remained along one side. 2 were level. The middle shelf dipped at the far end. Deborah had remembered it after more than 60 years. Connie went outside to get her. Ray and Jared cleared a path while the inspector waited at the pantry door. Deborah entered with her cane in one hand and Connie's arm beneath the other. She stopped in the kitchen. "It's smaller," she said. "Places usually are," Connie replied. "No, this really is smaller." There was another wall beyond that stove. Ray looked toward the rear corner. An addition may have come down. Deborah studied the pantry. "That's the shelf?" "You're sure?" Jared asked. "I spent an afternoon staring at it while your great-grandmother explained why crooked shelves were evidence of poor character." She stepped closer but didn't touch it. There used to be flour bins underneath. The bottom one had a tin handle. The bins were gone. In their place stood a warped cabinet painted the same gray as the wall. Ray crouched and aimed his flashlight along the base. This cabinet was built in front of something. The inspector joined him. Could be old plumbing. Ray tapped the side. The sound changed near the back. He removed 2 loose shelves from the cabinet and found screws beneath layers of paint. They weren't original square nails. Someone had installed the cabinet much later. The inspector allowed him to remove it as long as they didn't disturb the wall structure. The screws resisted. One snapped. Jared held the flashlight while Ray worked the others free. When they pulled the cabinet forward, the back panel came with it. Behind it was a shallow space between 2 walls. A narrow wooden door had been fitted into the older plaster. The door was barely wider than Connie's shoulders. A metal hasp crossed it, secured by a small brass padlock. Connie took the key from her pocket. Alexandra had called the piano worthless. Scott had called Larkspur an estate problem. Until that moment, part of Connie had still wondered whether Paulette's clues were pieces of separate things that grief had made her join together. The brass key entered the padlock cleanly. It turned on the first try. Nobody spoke. Ray removed the lock and opened the narrow door. The space behind it smelled dry. Shelves had been fitted between the studs. On the lowest one sat a green metal document, safe, no larger than a bread box. Deborah gripped Connie's arm. "Paulette did this." "How do you know?" "That paint." Deborah pointed toward the edge of the hidden door. "She used the same green on the quilt room cabinets. Mixed it herself because she said the color at the store looked sick." Ray shone his light across the interior. There were no footprints in the dust and no sign that anyone had opened the compartment recently. The safe had a handle and a simple latch. No keyhole showed on the front. Ray tested it. The latch moved, but the door stayed closed. "Rust?" Jared asked. "Maybe the seal's stuck." The inspector checked the shelf beneath it. "Take the whole box outside. I don't want 4 people leaning into this wall." Ray and Jared lifted it together. The safe was heavier than it looked. They carried it through the kitchen, along the cleared path, and out to the front lawn. Deborah sat in a folding chair while Ray examined the hinges. Connie stood beside the safe. "You think it's locked from inside somehow?" "No. These fireboxes sometimes seal when the lining swells." He worked a flat tool around the door without forcing the corners. After several minutes, a strip of brittle rubber came loose. The door opened with a dull pop. Inside were 3 bundles wrapped in waxed cloth. The first held property papers. The complete deed lay on top. Its recording date matched the fragment from the piano bench. Hollow Bend Holdings Trust was named as the buyer of Larkspur Inn and the surrounding land. Beneath it was a certificate Connie hadn't seen in the county copy. Paulette's name appeared on the second page, not as a witness, not as a former owner, as the person who had established Hollow Bend Holdings. Connie read the line twice. "She bought it," Jared said. Larry had warned them that a name on one paper might not settle everything. Connie remembered that. She didn't let herself move beyond what the document actually showed. But Paulette hadn't merely saved an old deed fragment. She had created the trust that purchased Larkspur in 1994. The second bundle contained a thick ledger with a faded cloth cover. Paulette's handwriting filled every page. Dates ran back through decades of quilt orders. Names of patterns appeared in one column. Payments, postage, fabric costs, and deposits appeared in others. A final column was marked with one letter, L. Some entries were only a few dollars. Others were larger. The total increased slowly over the years. Deborah removed her glasses and wiped them. "That's the business account." "What does the L mean?" Jared asked. Deborah looked toward the inn. "What do you think?" Connie turned several pages. After 1994, the entries changed. Instead of money being saved towards something, the ledger listed taxes, insurance, roof work, window repairs, and bank deposits. Paulette had continued putting quilt money into Larkspur long after she bought it. The third bundle held a sealed legal envelope. Larry Flores was written across the front in Paulette's hand. Below his name, she had written one instruction: to be opened with Connie. Ray checked the time. His office closes in an hour. Connie slid the envelope into the cardboard document box. We're not opening it here. Jared looked disappointed but didn't argue. The inspector photographed the empty compartment and marked the safe for removal. He warned them again that finding documents didn't authorize occupancy or repairs. We understand, Connie said. He gave her a look, suggesting most people claimed to understand while planning something else. Ray secured the pantry opening with a temporary panel. Jared carried the safe to Ray's truck. Deborah kept the ledger on her lap during the drive back into town. At Larry's office, they spread the documents across the conference table. Larry examined the deed, certificate, and recording stamps. He checked page numbers and seals. Then he looked through the ledger without turning more pages than necessary. This is more substantial than what we had. Does it prove Mama owned Larkspur? Connie asked. It strongly suggests she controlled the trust when it bought the property. I need to verify that the trust continued, whether it was amended, and whether anyone else acquired an interest. She paid for it with quilt money, Deborah said. The ledger appears to say that. I'll need matching bank records. Jared pointed to the sealed envelope. That has your name on it. Larry didn't touch it. It also says it should be opened with Connie. I'm here, Connie said. Larry lifted the envelope. He examined the seal, then placed it in front of her. Before we open this, you need to understand something. If it contains estate instructions, we follow the law, not merely a handwritten wish. If it contains a trust document, the exact terms matter. If it contains neither, it may still help explain the history, but it won't decide ownership. Connie nodded. She had spent weeks following a word without knowing whether it led to anything solid. Now, the room held proof that Paulette had bought back the place her family lost. That fact changed the shape of everything. Paulette hadn't hidden a ruined building because she was confused. She had hidden it because, for some reason Connie still didn't understand, she had wanted the right person to find it at the right time. Larry handed Connie a letter opener. She placed its point beneath the sealed edge. The paper released with a soft tearing sound. Inside was a notarized trust agreement dated in 2020. Larry's signature appeared on the last page, along with Paulette's and the signatures of 2 witnesses. He read the first pages silently. Jared shifted in his chair. Well? Larry held up one finger. Connie watched his expression. He wasn't surprised that the document existed. He was surprised to find it there. Finally, he turned the agreement toward her. This creates an irrevocable trust for Larkspur Inn and an account held with it. Paulette named herself as trustee during her lifetime. What does irrevocable mean? Jared asked. That she couldn't simply take the property back after transferring it into this arrangement. It was no longer part of her ordinary personal estate. Who gets it now? Larry pointed to a paragraph. Connie is the sole beneficiary. Nobody spoke for several seconds. Connie read her full name on the page. Connie Hill Walton. Not the 3 grandchildren together, not the estate, not whoever sold the house fastest. Her. What account? She asked. The agreement identifies one by number, but there's no balance listed here. Trust documents usually don't carry a changing balance. Can we find out? If the account is still active. Deborah touched the ledger. That's where the quilt money went. Some of it appears to have gone toward buying and maintaining Larkspur, Larry said. The remaining deposits may have gone into the trust account. We need records before we state that as fact. Ray looked at the date. You drew this up? Yes. Then why didn't you know about the deed? Paulette brought me copies. She said the originals were secured. You didn't ask where? I did. She said, somewhere my family won't clean out while I'm still warm. Connie lowered her eyes. Larry's voice softened. At the time, I thought she was being sharp. Paulette could be sharp. She knew, Connie said. She was worried. About Alexandra? She never named anyone. But she wrote this after Gregory died and after I moved in with her. Yes. Another envelope remained inside the legal packet. It was addressed to Connie. Her name was written more steadily than it had been on the note in the piano bench. Paulette had written this years before her hands began to shake. Connie opened it. The letter was short. Larkspur was taken from our family when I was young. I bought it back with work nobody thought amounted to much. Connie understands work like that. She gave years to her husband, then came to me before she had time to find out what her own life might still hold. This is not payment for care. Care cannot be priced without making it smaller. This is a place where nobody can tell her she is temporary. The account is for taxes, repairs, and enough time to decide wisely. Do not let anyone rush you. A person in a hurry usually wants your answer before you understand the question. Connie stopped reading. Deborah looked toward the window. Ray studied his hands. Jared said, "Grandma knew what Alexandra would do." "No," Connie replied. She knew what being hurried felt like. She folded the letter along its existing crease. The trust revealed Paulette's intention, but it didn't yet settle the title. Larry needed the original bank records, proof that the property had been properly transferred, and confirmation that no later document changed the trust. He placed every page in order. "I'll contact the bank named here and request the account history. I'll also use the trust certificate to trace the title. Until that's done, don't discuss the account or the beneficiary terms outside this room." Jared nodded. Deborah said, "I've kept Paulette's old business records. Not all of them, but enough. Bring anything showing deposits, account numbers, or annual totals. I'll start tonight." Larry looked at Connie. "Alexandra may learn that we found additional documents. She has no right to see private trust records unless she files a challenge and establishes a basis. Still, she'll ask. She can ask. What will you tell her? The truth. We're verifying what Mama left." Larry placed Paulette's letter in a separate sleeve. Good. Nothing more. 2 days later, Alexandra provided the location of the furniture. The private warehouse turned out to be a corrugated metal building Scott used for cabinets. Flooring and appliances were moved from houses he planned to renovate. Paulette's belongings occupied the rear third. Larry arranged the inspection. Connie brought her notebook. Jared came because Connie asked him to. Alexandra and Scott were already waiting when they arrived. Scott unlocked the rolling door. "Everything's here," he said. It wasn't. Connie began with the list she had written in the empty house. The dining table and chairs were present. So were the sofa, end tables, walnut desk, bedroom furniture, and boxes of china. The silver tea service was missing. 2 quilts were missing. Several framed photographs weren't there. The jewelry box sat on a workbench, but Paulette's wedding ring and pearl earrings were gone. Connie checked the contents twice. "Where are they?" Alexandra looked at Scott. "The jewelry is secured separately." "Where?" "At home." "Your home?" "Yes." "Why?" "It shouldn't be sitting in a warehouse. Neither should Mama's family photographs. They're in a box somewhere." "Which box?" "There are a lot of boxes, Mom." Connie opened the nearest one. Each item inside had a small white price sticker. The walnut desk had one too. So did the dining table, the china, and Paulette's rocking chair. Larry picked up a clipboard hanging beside the workbench. An estate sale intake form had been completed in Alexandra's handwriting. At the bottom, a section labeled Owner Authorization carried her signature. The date was the morning after the funeral. "You represented yourself as personal representative of the estate," Larry said. "I believe the power of attorney covered it. You work in real estate. I don't practice probate law. You knew enough to arrange a sale." Scott stepped between them. "Nothing was sold, because I sent notice before the sale happened. That proves we complied. It proves you stopped when someone was watching." Alexandra's eyes moved toward Connie. "Is this what you wanted? You wanted to bring an attorney and inspect boxes like we're criminals?" "I wanted my mother's property accounted for." "It is accounted for. Where's the cash?" Alexandra opened her leather folder and produced a handwritten page. The amount from Paulette's emergency envelope was listed near the top. Connie read it. "Where is it now?" "We deposited it." "Into what?" "A holding account." Larry asked for the bank name and account statement. Scott's jaw tightened. "This is becoming ridiculous." "No," Connie said. It became clear. She walked farther into the warehouse. Against the wall stood several pieces of new flooring, paint samples, and a kitchen cabinet door. A printed estimate lay beneath them. The address at the top was the Lindell Avenue house. The work included new counters, refinished floors, interior paint, and removal of the old piano. Scott's company name appeared at the bottom. Beside it was a draft listing plan prepared by Alexandra. It estimated an asking price after renovation and included the commission her brokerage would receive. The papers were dated 3 days before Paulette died. Connie felt something inside her settle. There had been no sudden panic over estate debts, no urgent need to protect furniture. Alexandra and Scott had planned to clear the house, renovate it through Scott's business, and list it through Alexandra's brokerage. The family would eventually divide whatever remained, but they intended to be paid before that division. Connie was the obstacle they'd planned around. She carried the papers to the workbench. "You prepared this while Grandma was alive," Jared said. Alexandra didn't deny it. "She was in hospice," she replied. "We knew the house would need to be handled." "Handled?" Connie asked. "Sold." "You knew it would be sold." "I knew it might be. The will says it has to be." The will wasn't read yet. Alexandra's control finally slipped, because nobody else was making a plan. "I was caring for a dying woman, and that's all you were doing. You weren't thinking about bills or upkeep or what happened next. I was thinking about what happened next every morning. Then what was your plan? Keep living there indefinitely while taxes and insurance came out of the estate?" Connie looked at the estimate. "My plan wasn't to bill the family for work I arranged without their knowledge." Scott picked up the paper. "Those are ordinary costs that pay you. The house needed preparation, and Alexandra's brokerage needed a commission." Alexandra folded her arms. "Someone would earn it. So you decided it should be both of you. We were trying to keep the money in the family." Jared stared at her. "By paying yourselves from it?" Alexandra turned on him. "Don't act shocked. You would have received your share without lifting a finger. That doesn't make this right. You didn't object until Mom found another property. There it was. Not grief, not debt, not even the old power of attorney. Control." Alexandra had spent years watching Connie give her time away, first to Gregory, then to Paulette. She had mistaken service for surrender. When Paulette died, Alexandra assumed the practical daughter would take charge and the tired mother would accept whatever room was found for her. Larkspur changed that. If it belonged to Connie, Alexandra couldn't list it, Scott couldn't renovate it on his terms, and neither of them could decide when it should be sold. Connie placed the draft listing plan beside Larry. "You knew I had nowhere to go." Alexandra's anger faltered. "We found you a room for 2 weeks. We thought the estate would move quickly." "You thought I would," Scott said. "This has nothing to do with Larkspur." "It has everything to do with it," Connie replied. "You saw another building and assumed it was yours to handle. If Paulette bought it with money from her business, it may belong to the estate," Larry answered. "That depends on the trust documents and title history." Alexandra looked at him. "You found the trust?" Larry didn't reply. Her eyes moved to Connie. "You did." "We found papers," Connie said. "They're being verified." "What do they say?" "That's not your concern yet. I'm her granddaughter, and I'm her daughter. That didn't give you the right to hide assets." Connie looked around at the warehouse. "You should be careful with that sentence." Jared turned away, shaking his head. Larry instructed Scott to transfer the cash into an estate account and return the jewelry. He ordered a complete professional inventory before anything moved again. Alexandra listened without interrupting. Her silence wasn't agreement. Connie knew her well enough to see the calculation returning. At the warehouse door, Alexandra stopped her. "If those papers give you Larkspur, we'll challenge them." "On what ground? That Grandma wasn't competent, that you influenced her, that you kept information from the family? You didn't know the place existed, neither did you." "That's true." Alexandra seemed disappointed that Connie admitted it so easily. "You can't prove what happened in that house every day." "No," Connie said, "but neither can you." She stepped outside with Paulette's missing photographs under her arm. Behind her, Scott lowered the rolling door over the furniture they had already priced. Connie carried them back to Mrs. Bell's and spread them across the bed. Most were ordinary family pictures, Christmas dinners, birthdays, Gregory standing beside a charcoal grill, Jared holding up a fish, Alexandra in her wedding dress with one hand pressed to her veil against the wind. At the bottom was an older photograph Connie had never seen. Paulette stood on a porch beside 2 women in work aprons. She was young, perhaps in her early 20s. Behind her, a painted sign showed part of a name, Larkspur Inn. Paulette wasn't smiling at the camera. She was looking towards someone outside the frame, amused and impatient at once. Connie turned the photograph over. Home, before the bank. The words were in Paulette's handwriting. Connie placed the picture beside Gregory's on the dresser. Then she unpacked the rest of her suitcase. Not because Mrs. Bell's room had become home. It hadn't. She was simply tired of living as if Alexandra's 2-week limit still controlled anything. Deborah brought 4 storage boxes to Larry's office the next morning. They contained order forms, bank deposit slips, tax returns, mailing receipts, and carbon copies of letters Paulette had sent customers. "I should have thrown these out years ago," Deborah said. Larry opened the first box. "I'm glad you didn't. Paulette told me business records should be kept for 7 years. These are older than some people's marriages. She never told me when the 7 years started. The earliest records matched the ledger from Larkspur. Small deposits had gone into Paulette's business account. A second transfer appeared at the end of each month. The receiving account was identified only by its final numbers. Those numbers matched an account listed in the trust documents. Larry made copies and sent them to the bank with a formal request. He also contacted the law firm holding the files of the attorney who had prepared the 1994 purchase. The waiting was different now. Before the safe was opened, every delay threatened to leave Connie with nothing but clues. Now the proof existed. The question was whether every piece connected cleanly enough to survive Alexandra's challenge. Connie stayed busy. She and Ray returned to the piano. He replaced the broken bridle strap, repaired 2 worn hammers, and cleaned decades of dust from the soundboard. Connie removed the green fabric from the bench carefully enough to preserve Paulette's stitches. "You keeping it?" Ray asked. "Yes, it's faded. So am I." "You're not green. Give me time." Ray smiled and handed her a jar for the old screws. Jared came after work on 2 evenings. The first time, he brought sandwiches. The second time, he brought lumber to build a safer platform beneath the piano. He didn't offer another apology. Instead, he labeled every photograph from the warehouse and created a digital copy of Connie's inventory. "Alexandra texted me," he said. "What did she want?" "She asked what you found at Larkspur." "What did you tell her?" "That she should ask Larry." Connie looked up from the bench. "Thank you." Jared nodded and returned to the scanner. The bank answered first. The account was active. Paulette had opened it under Hollow Bend Holdings and later placed it under the Irrevocable Trust. Deposits from the quilting business appeared for decades. After the purchase of Larkspur, money had continued moving into the account, even during years when Paulette paid for repairs and taxes. The current balance was $340,000. Larry read the amount aloud in his conference room. Connie didn't react at first. She had expected enough for overdue repairs, perhaps a few $1,000s. Paulette's letter had said the account would give her time to decide. $340,000 was more time than Connie knew how to measure. Deborah sat beside her. "She kept sewing after her hands hurt," she said quietly. "She never acted as if she had money. She didn't think that money was hers to spend." "What did she think it was?" Deborah touched the photograph of Paulette on the Larkspur porch. A road back. Larry warned them that the account couldn't be released yet. The bank required a certified death certificate, proof of the successor trustee, and confirmation that no amendment had changed the beneficiary. "Who is the successor trustee?" Jared asked. "I am, for the limited purpose of settling and distributing the trust," Larry said. Paulette wanted someone outside the family handling that part. "Smart," Deborah said. Larry almost smiled. She was direct about it. The old attorney's archived file arrived at the end of September. It contained signed purchase instructions, a certified copy of the 1994 deed, the original Hollow Bend trust certificate, and correspondence with the bank that had sold Larkspur. The purchase price had been paid from Paulette's quilting account. No family estate money was involved. No later owner appeared in the chain. A licensed title examiner reviewed every transfer from the foreclosure forward. He checked the county records, tax history, legal description, trust certificate, and the 2020 agreement. His written report was 19 pages long. Larry explained it in 4 sentences. Hollow Bend bought Larkspur legally in 1994. Paulette controlled Hollow Bend. She placed the property and account into an irrevocable trust in 2020. At her death, both passed to you outside her estate. Connie held the report. "Alexandra has no share, not in Larkspur or the trust account. Scott, none. Can they stop me from entering? Not based on ownership. The city can restrict access because of the building's condition, But the property is yours. What about the back taxes? They're cleared. Your payment protected your own property, though you didn't know that when you made it. Connie read the final page. The examiner's seal appeared beneath his signature. The incomplete paper in the piano bench had led to the recorded deed. The brass key had opened the compartment. The compartment had held the documents that completed the title. Paulette had separated the proof so it couldn't be swept into a truck with everything else. Larry slid another document across the table. This is the certification we'll record. It identifies the current trustee and beneficiary without placing the entire private agreement in the public file. When? Tomorrow, if you sign. Connie signed. The following afternoon, the county record showed Larkspur under the trust for Connie's benefit. Larry kept the original deed, trust, ledger, bank confirmation, and title report in secure storage. Connie retained certified copies. She bought a locking document case and kept the copies beside her bed. That evening, she returned to River Bluff Road with Ray and Jared. For the first time, the city recognized her as the responsible owner. It gave her authority to secure openings, remove debris that posed a hazard, and begin a professional assessment. It also gave her responsibility for everything that could fall, leak, or injure someone. Ray walked through the ground floor again. The good news is the front structure is solid, and the bad news? The rear roof, electrical system, plumbing, foundation drainage, porch, stairs, windows, kitchen, and probably half the things we haven't uncovered. That sounded longer than the good news. It was. Jared looked into the parlor. What would it cost? To make it safe or to make it an inn? Both. Ray rubbed dust between his fingers. Safe might be possible with the trust money. Fully restored could cost more than that. Connie stood where the piano might once have been. Scratches in the floor showed the shape of a large instrument near the wall. I don't want to sell it, neither man answered immediately. Ray said, then don't. I also don't want to spend everything making 3 rooms dry while the rest falls down. That's also sensible. So I need another option. An option arrived 2 days later. Kathleen Lowe called Larry after seeing the recorded trust certification. She had been trying to identify Larkspur's owner for several years. The closed post office box and private trust name had stopped every letter she sent. Larry arranged a meeting, but told Connie nothing would be agreed without independent advice. Kathleen came to Larkspur in practical shoes and carried a thick binder. She didn't begin by praising the river view. She began with drainage. Water is the first enemy, she said. Then weather. Then people who say, we'll fix that later. Ray liked her immediately, though he didn't show it. Kathleen had restored 2 small historic properties in northeast Missouri. One operated as a guest house. The other held offices and a restaurant. She worked with tax credits, preservation grants, and private investors who expected steady returns instead of quick resale. She opened the binder on the hood of her car. I paid for a preliminary valuation last year when I thought the county might take Larkspur. You were watching the tax sale too, Connie said. Yes, but I wasn't planning to strip it. Kathleen showed her photographs of surviving woodwork, river access, the original dining room, and the front porch. Restored as a small inn with the historic features kept and the rear wing rebuilt properly, the appraised value is about $1,100,000. Jared let out a breath. Ray asked, restored value, not current? Correct. Right now, it's a dangerous building on valuable land. The higher figure depends on permits, financing, and the restoration actually being completed. What do you want? Connie asked. A partnership. You keep ownership of the property through your trust. My group funds and manages most of the restoration. We recover our investment from the business over time. You retain a residence here and a controlling interest. You've already worked out terms? I worked out possible terms before I knew who owned it. Why? Because buildings like this don't wait for people to become organized. Kathleen's answer sounded practical, not charming. Connie trusted it more for that reason. Would I have to operate the inn? Only if you want to. We'd hire staff. Could the parlor be used by people in town, for events, for ordinary things, music, quilting, coffee, people who don't need a room? Kathleen considered the question. That could be part of the plan. Connie looked toward the covered windows. Paulette had left her more than valuable property. She had left a responsibility large enough to consume the money meant to protect it. The partnership might save Larkspur without forcing Connie to sell. It might also place another determined person inside decisions Paulette intended Connie to make. "I need time," Connie said. "Take it. But there's a preservation meeting in October. The town must approve parts of the restoration plan, and public support helps with grants. Do you want to present this there? With your permission." "Not yet." Kathleen closed the binder. Then, "Not yet." She gave Connie a copy of the preliminary appraisal and left without asking for an answer. That night, Alexandra sent a letter through an attorney threatening to challenge the trust. She claimed Connie had isolated Paulette, influenced her estate decisions, and concealed valuable property from the family. Larry read it once. "Claims aren't proof," he said. Connie placed the title report beside Alexandra's letter. For weeks, her daughter had controlled the pace by moving faster than anyone could object. Connie finally held something speed couldn't alter. She had the deed, the trust, the ledger, the bank records, and a clean title. She also had Paulette's instruction: "Do not let anyone rush you." Connie called Kathleen the next morning. "You can place the preservation proposal on the October agenda," she said. "But the property remains mine, and we discuss partnership terms only after the town hears the plan." Kathleen agreed. Connie then called Larry. "Bring certified copies," she said. "Alexandra won't keep this private," Larry answered. "I'll bring the originals too." During the week before the meeting, Connie reviewed the partnership outline with an independent accountant Larry recommended. Kathleen's figures were careful, but they weren't simple. The trust would continue owning Larkspur. A separate company would operate the inn. Kathleen's investors would fund the major construction and recover their money from operating income over an agreed period. Connie would keep control of the property and a permanent apartment on the ground floor. Nothing could be sold or mortgaged without her written approval. Connie changed that last provision. "Written approval isn't enough," she told Kathleen. "I want the trust to prohibit a sale while I'm alive. That could make future financing harder. Then financing will have to be harder." Kathleen studied her for a moment. "All right." Connie also insisted that the parlor remain available for community use several evenings each month. She wanted local quilters to have tables there. She wanted the piano returned when Ray finished it. She wanted people who came for coffee or music to feel welcome even if they never paid for a room. Kathleen made notes without arguing. "You've thought about this." "I'm beginning to." That's usually enough to improve a plan. Jared attended the second meeting. He asked about insurance, construction schedules, and whether local workers would be hired. Afterward, he walked Connie to her car. "Alexandra called me again." "What did she want this time?" "She wants the three of us to meet without Larry." "Why?" "She says lawyers make families take positions they can't come back from." "She took my mother's wedding ring home before a lawyer said anything." "I told her that." Connie unlocked her car. "What did she say?" "She said you're using Larkspur to punish her." Connie put her folder on the passenger seat. "I haven't done anything to her. She thinks not sharing it is something you're doing to her. That's the problem." Jared stood beside the open door. "I should have come when you called from the empty house." "Yes." He swallowed. "I'm sorry." Connie didn't tell him it was all right. It wasn't. "I'm glad you came later," she said. That was what she could honestly give him. Alexandra asked to meet 2 days before the preservation hearing. She chose a coffee shop downtown and arrived with Scott. Connie arrived alone, but Larry knew where she was and had advised her not to sign anything. Alexandra had already ordered tea for her. "You still drink this, don't you?" "I do." "I wasn't sure." Connie sat down. Scott placed a folder on the table. "We're not here to fight. Then we should have a short meeting." Alexandra ignored that. "We've had time to think. Whatever Grandma intended, this situation is tearing the family apart. The rental truck did most of that work." "Mom, please." Connie waited. Alexandra pushed the folder toward her. Inside was a proposed family settlement. Connie would sell Larkspur. After taxes, expenses, and repayment of the $14,000, the remaining proceeds would be divided among Connie, Jared, and Alexandra. Scott had included an option allowing his company to manage repairs before the sale. Connie closed the folder. "No? You didn't read it? I read enough." "You'd receive the largest immediate benefit," Scott said. "You wouldn't carry construction risk, and you could buy a smaller house. I already own a large one. A condemned inn isn't a home. It will be." Alexandra leaned closer. "Why do you need all of it?" Connie considered the question. "Why did you need a commission from Grandma's house? That's not the same. It's exactly the same question. I worked to build my business, and Mama worked to buy Larkspur. She meant for the family to benefit. She wrote what she meant. Alexandra lowered her voice. You don't know what she would have wanted if she understood what the property was worth. She understood enough to keep it away from you. Scott sat back. Alexandra stared at Connie. Hurt appeared first. Then anger covered it. You've always done that. Done what? Acted like caring for people made you the only decent person in the room. I've never said that. You didn't have to. You stayed with Dad when he got sick. You stayed with Grandma. Every time Jared or I couldn't be there. You made silence feel like a judgment. Connie looked at her daughter's untouched coffee. I asked for help. We had lives. So did I. You were retired. That isn't the same as having no life. Alexandra's eyes filled, but she didn't cry. I'm not letting you rewrite everything. Connie stood. I'm not asking permission to remember it. Scott tapped the settlement folder. If you reject this, we'll object at the meeting. Then object. It could delay permits. I know. It could damage Kathleen's financing. I know that too. Alexandra looked up. You'd let us do that? No. You'll decide whether to do it. Connie left the tea untouched. The preservation meeting was held on the second Thursday in October. By 6 o'clock, every chair in the municipal room was occupied. Larkspur had been abandoned long enough to become part of the town's scenery. The possibility that it could reopen brought former guests, nearby property owners, preservation volunteers, and people who were simply curious. Kathleen placed 2 easels at the front. One held the current photograph. The other showed a careful rendering of the restored inn. The design kept the original porch, front parlor, dining room, and upper guest rooms. A rebuilt rear wing contained a commercial kitchen, accessible entrance, and Connie's apartment. Ray stood near the rendering. They drew the porch too clean. It's a proposed restoration, Kathleen said. Still looks suspicious. You can make it less suspicious during construction. Larry arrived carrying 2 document cases. Deborah brought the quilt ledger in a padded bag. Jared helped her find a seat, then sat behind Connie. Alexandra and Scott entered just before the meeting began. She wore the cream jacket from her real estate advertisements. Scott carried a laptop case and a stack of printed pages. They sat across the aisle instead of with the family. The board handled 2 smaller matters first. Connie listened to a discussion about a storefront awning, without remembering any of it. Then the chairman announced the Larkspur proposal. Kathleen spoke for 20 minutes. She explained the structural report, drainage work, roof replacement, preservation requirements, financing plan, and projected construction schedule. She described a small inn, not a resort. It would have guest rooms, a breakfast service, public parlor hours, and space for community gatherings. Then she gave the restored valuation, $1,100,000. The room stirred. Connie didn't look across the aisle. She could feel Alexandra and Scott absorbing the number. Kathleen made clear that the figure depended on completing the work. She also explained that Larkspur had a verified owner, and that the trust holding it had authorized the proposal. That was the first time most people in the room learned Connie owned the inn. The chairman invited questions. A nearby resident asked about parking. Someone else asked whether weddings would be permitted. Kathleen answered both. Ray spoke briefly about the front structure and the need to rebuild the rear roof before winter. He avoided promises he couldn't support. Then Alexandra stood. The chairman recognized her. My concern isn't parking, she said. My concern is whether the person proposing this project has the legal and moral right to control the property. Several heads turned toward Connie. Alexandra faced the room. My grandmother was 91 when she died. She depended entirely on my mother. My mother controlled her medication, appointments, mail, banking information, and access to visitors. Connie felt Ray lean toward her. She kept her hands folded. Alexandra continued. Now, a valuable property that nobody in the family knew existed has appeared under a private trust naming my mother. We're expected to accept that without examining how those documents were created. The chairman asked, Are you asserting the title report is incorrect? I'm asserting that a legal document can be signed under pressure. Larry made no move to answer. Connie had asked him to wait until Alexandra finished. Scott stood beside his wife. We have photographs showing this property was deliberately left to deteriorate while taxes went unpaid. Then Mrs. Walton secretly paid those taxes before notifying the other heirs. We weren't heirs to Larkspur, Jared said from behind Connie. Alexandra turned. That's what we're being told. No interruptions, please, the chairman said. Scott passed printed copies of the condemnation notice to the board. The current proposal depends on trust assets that should be examined as part of Paulette Hill's estate. Until that happens, no permits or preservation support should be approved. Kathleen remained beside the easel. Her expression gave nothing away. The chairman looked at Alexandra. Do you have a court order disputing ownership? We've notified our attorney. That wasn't my question. We're preparing a challenge. Alexandra opened her leather folder and removed the old power of attorney. This shows that Grandma trusted me to assist with financial matters. Yet, I was never told about Larkspur. Larry wrote one line on his legal pad. Connie saw it. Ended at death. Alexandra submitted a copy of the power of attorney to the board. Then she provided a written statement accusing Connie of isolating Paulette and concealing assets. She had signed it. Scott submitted the proposed family settlement, though Connie had rejected it. He described it as evidence that they had tried to resolve the matter privately. Connie understood why he included it. He wanted the room to see them as reasonable people offering compromise. The chairman asked Alexandra whether she had first-hand knowledge that Paulette lacked capacity in 2020. I know she was declining. Were you present when the trust was signed? No. Did you speak with the witnesses? Not yet. Do you have medical evidence from that date? We haven't received the records. Alexandra looked toward Connie. But my mother knows how dependent Grandma was. She knows how easily she could be influenced. Connie said nothing. The silence made Alexandra go further. She lived in that house without paying rent. She managed the Daily Mail. She had access to business records. Then, after Grandma died, she removed a piano that supposedly contained a hidden deed. It was left to her in the will, Jared said. The chairman warned him again. Alexandra's voice sharpened. We're being asked to believe my grandmother created a secret fortune, hid the title inside furniture, and told nobody except the daughter who stood to receive everything. Connie almost corrected her. The complete title hadn't been in the piano. The bench held the clue that led to it. She let Alexandra remain wrong. Scott opened his laptop and displayed photographs of the inn on the room's screen. Broken windows, fallen plaster, the damaged roof, the crooked porch. This is what Mrs. Walton spent $14,000 to claim, he said. Now that an investor says it may be worth over $1 million, she wants the town to accept her story without question. Connie looked around the room. People who had known Paulette were listening. Some looked doubtful, others looked angry. A few avoided Connie's eyes. Alexandra believed uncertainty would work in her favor. She had no proof of pressure, but she hoped the accusation itself would stain every document Larry produced. The chairman gave her one final opportunity. Mrs. Reed, are you formally asking this board to delay the Larkspur proposal because you believe your mother manipulated Paulette Hill? Alexandra looked at Scott. He nodded. She faced the board. Yes, that is exactly what I'm saying. The room went quiet. Connie waited another moment. Then she looked at Larry and said, Now. Larry stood and carried the first document case to the front table. This board doesn't decide inheritance disputes, he said, but Mrs. Reed has challenged the ownership supporting this proposal. That can be answered. He handed the chairman a certified title report. The Hill family lost Larkspur through foreclosure in 1961. Paulette Hill repurchased it in 1994 through Hollow Bend Holdings Trust. The recorded deed, purchase file, and bank records all agree. He placed the trust certificate beside it. In 2020, Paulette transferred Larkspur and its account into an irrevocable trust. Connie Walton is the sole beneficiary. I prepared that agreement. Paulette gave me her instructions privately. Connie wasn't present. Alexandra stood again. Grandma was already sick. She was receiving treatment for physical conditions. I found no sign that she lacked the ability to understand her property or decisions. 2 independent witnesses and a notary reached the same conclusion. Larry opened the second case. The trust account currently holds $340,000. Business records show the money came from Paulette's quilting income. It did not come from her estate, Connie, or any shared family account. Deborah carried the old ledger forward. I worked beside Paulette, she said. Those entries are hers. I cut fabric and packed orders while she kept the books. The letter L meant Larkspur. Alexandra looked at her. You knew about this? I knew her family lost the inn. I didn't know she bought it back. So nobody knew. Paulette knew, Deborah replied. That appears to have been enough. Larry showed the board the deed fragment from the bench, the brass key, and photographs of the hidden pantry compartment. The piano bench didn't contain a convenient new deed created after Paulette's death. It held part of the recorded 1994 deed. That fragment led Connie to public records. The key led to the original documents. Ray stood beside Connie. Paulette asked me to repair that bench in 2020, he said. She wouldn't let me replace it, told me to brace the leg and leave the seat alone. Connie turned toward him. He had never mentioned it because until that moment, he hadn't understood why it mattered. Ray continued. She said, Connie has spent enough years standing on floors that belonged to somebody else. I thought she meant the Lindell house. I was wrong. The chairman looked at Connie. Did you know Larkspur belonged to your mother before her death? No. Did you know about the trust? No. When did you first see this property? After we found the deed fragment in July. Why did you pay the taxes? The county sale was approaching. I knew Mama had hidden the name for me, but I didn't know whether the property was mine. I paid with my own savings so there would be time to find out. Did you tell Mrs. Reed? No. Why not? Connie looked across the aisle. 48 hours after my mother's funeral, my daughter used an expired power of attorney to empty the Lindell Avenue house. She took the furniture, cash, jewelry, and family photographs before the will was read. She left me a suitcase and arranged a room for 2 weeks. The only thing she didn't take was the piano, because Scott said it was scrap wood. Scott looked down. Connie didn't raise her voice. The will gave that piano and anything inside it to me. I followed what Mama left. Every document has been examined. Every dollar has been traced. That's the truth. Alexandra's face had lost its careful public expression. You're making this sound like we threw you into the street. You decided where I would sleep without asking me. We were trying to settle the estate. You were trying to sell the house through your brokerage and pay Scott to renovate it. The written plans were dated before Mama died. A low murmur moved through the room. Alexandra looked toward Jared for help. He didn't give it. The chairman called the room to order. He reviewed Larry's report, then asked whether Alexandra had any evidence contradicting it. She had accusations, an expired power of attorney, and photographs of a damaged building. She had no evidence. The board voted to let the preservation application proceed. Afterward, Alexandra caught Connie near the doors. You humiliated me. Connie held the document case against her side. No. You stood up and made a claim. I answered it. What happens now? You return Grandma's ring and earrings. You finish the estate inventory. Any discussion about Larkspur goes through Larry. I'm still your daughter. Yes. The answer wasn't an invitation. Scott touched Alexandra's arm. This time, she left when he asked. Their attorney withdrew the threatened challenge 2 weeks later. There was no legal ground for it. Alexandra and Scott faced no criminal charges and no dramatic punishment. People simply stopped trusting their explanations as easily as before. Several potential clients chose other agents. The town remembered the truck, the suitcase, and the papers dated before Paulette's death. A local website ran a story about the meeting. Mrs. Bell read the headline aloud over breakfast. Connie buttered her toast. That's not quite precise. It got me to read it, Mrs. Bell said. Kathleen and Connie signed their partnership agreement at Larkspur 3 days later. The trust retained the property. Connie kept final authority over any sale or mortgage. The investors funded the main restoration. The parlor remained available for music, quilting, and town gatherings. Work began before the first hard frost. Ray supervised the roof crew and rejected lumber that arrived warped. Jared spent Saturdays removing damaged plaster and carrying debris. Connie worked beside him when the task suited her strength. She stripped paint from door hardware, cataloged room numbers, and cleaned surviving tiles one at a time. One afternoon, Jared found her kneeling beside a box of brass hinges. You should use the pad, he said. He brought a folded kneeling pad without waiting for an answer. Thank you. He crouched beside her. I keep thinking about that call from the empty house. So do I. I believed Alexandra because it was easier than leaving work. Connie rubbed old paint from a hinge. I know. I can't change that. No. He picked up the next hinge. I can come Saturday. That would help. They worked without trying to turn the moment into more than it was. Kathleen handled permits, financing, and contractors. She argued with Connie about bathroom tile and lost. Connie argued with her about the kitchen doorway and lost. Neither mistook disagreement for betrayal. The piano returned in November. Ray had repaired the action and tuned it as well as the old frame allowed. The finish still carried scratches, including the watermark on the bench. Connie had replaced the green fabric using cloth Deborah found among Paulette's quilting supplies. 4 people moved it into the parlor. Ray pressed the dead key. A clear note sounded. "Still scrapwood?" Jared asked. Scott wasn't there to answer. Larkspur reopened late in November. It had 8 guest rooms, a warm dining room, and a parlor facing the river. Deborah's quilting group took the long table on Wednesday afternoons. Ray drank coffee near the fireplace and complained when strangers leaned cups on the piano. Connie's apartment occupied the quiet end of the ground floor. It wasn't large. It had a bedroom, a sitting room, a blue kitchen, and windows looking toward the Mississippi. Alexandra didn't attend the opening. She sent Paulette's wedding ring and pearl earrings through Larry. There was no note. Connie placed them in the walnut desk, which had been returned after the estate inventory. She didn't call her daughter that night. Forgiveness wasn't a door Connie planned to open merely because someone had finally stopped pushing against it. If stories about reclaiming dignity after family abandonment matter to you, subscribe and return for the next inheritance story. After the last opening day guest went upstairs, Connie checked the front lock. She crossed the parlor and switched off all but one lamp beside the piano. Paulette's photograph stood on top, facing the room. In her apartment, the suitcase rested open on the bed. Connie removed Gregory's photograph, 2 books, and the clothes still folded at the bottom. She placed everything where she wanted it, then carried the empty suitcase to the closet. Downstairs, someone touched a piano key and laughed softly. Connie turned her key in her own door, set water to boil in the blue kitchen, and watched the lights of Hannibal settle along the river below her home.